Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 6 of my 2020 reads. This week I read 2 middle grade books and 2 children's picture books. So the first middle grade book that I finished this week was The Gold Bat by P.G. Wodehouse. This is a book that Sush, my husband, read to me as a bedtime story, and I was actually really impressed by this one. Usually when P.G. Wodehouse writes his stories about young boys who are at boarding school and playing sports, it gets real dull. There's nothing like a P.G. Wodehouse cricket scene to put me to sleep within a minute. However, this one was actually quite fun. The story is about some boys and they are trying to kind of uncover a mystery. There is some sort of secret society which is starting to terrorize people and like destroy their rooms and punish people if they do things that the society doesn't like. So there's a group of boys who are trying to figure that out while also dealing with, sports, because they're trying to win various competitions and things like that. And it was actually really fun. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I just like P.G. Wodehouse's writing style. I like the way he creates characters, the ridiculousness of the characters and their situations. It was just a lot of fun. Overall, I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. The other middle grade that I finished was not quite so lighthearted. It was The Poet Slave of Cuba by Margarita Engle. This is a nonfiction biography told in verse about a man who was a poet as well as a slave in Cuba in, I believe, the 1800s. This book is just heart-wrenching. It is beautiful. The poetry is so lovely, but the story is very, very difficult to read through. This poet was a genius, basically, very, very talented, but his life was extremely tragic, and the way that his mistress kind of abused him as a slave was just so heart-wrenching, and the book goes into quite a lot of detail about it. So even though this is a middle grade, as an adult I found it very hard to read about the levels of abuse that were perpetrated against this poet. It was heart-wrenching, and although I think that this has a lot to offer, it's also something that if you're interested in it, you should go in knowing that it's going to be a challenging read. Margarita Engle does a wonderful job with her middle grade in verse kind of historical novels, but yeah, this one was hard to read. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I finished a children's picture book, Sulwe by Lupita Nyong'o, illustrated by Vashti. This is a book that I heard about from Priscilla at Bookie Charm and Yvette at BookCave, who I will link below. And it is a very beautiful picture book that takes a look at a little girl, Sulwe, who has very dark toned skin, and she is struggling because her sister and her parents all have lighter toned skin than she has, and they're seen as much more beautiful, and she's really kind of struggling with those feelings of, not liking how she looks and being treated differently because of it. So this book really addresses the idea of colorism within, Black communities where lighter shades of skin are seen as more beautiful. And I really liked, especially in the middle of the book, it kind of goes into telling a myth about the sun and the moon, the day sky and the night sky, and talking about how all of these different shades have beauty. So I loved that part of it. I thought that the artwork was really, really beautiful. I loved the message. I think that there were some parts that, weren't necessarily as engaging, especially just kind of in the build-up of the story. It was just a little slow somehow in a picture book for me. But overall, I still really, really enjoyed this picture book, and I give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I read Léonard de Vinci et les Châteaux de la Loire by Frederic, Brremaud, illustrated by Paola Antista. So this is a picture book that I had on my list for my non-English book project. I'll link the video about that below if you're curious. So I read this just a little bit later, so this was supposed to be like January read, but it's okay. This is my first non-English book of the year, so I'm very proud to at least have gotten one. I think I understood maybe about 60% of this book, so that's not bad for me given French. French is actually quite challenging for me. But the story is basically about a little girl, Zoe, and her magical pet lemur, Bonbon, who travel back in time to go meet Leonardo da Vinci when he was living in France in the Loire Valley. He worked for King Francis I as just sort of an engineer, an artist, advisor, these sorts of things. And so this book is all about just trying to explore a little bit about Leonardo da Vinci's artwork and his inventions and his life. So it's sort of a biography, but done in a cute little way with this time traveling girl and her very annoying little lemur, Bonbon. Bonbon gets into all sorts of trouble. He was, I think, supposed to be the comedic relief, but just got on my nerves. So I really liked the parts of this that talked about Leonardo da Vinci and his life, and even like introduced Francis I and his relationship with Leonardo. All of that was really cool, especially because Sush and I have been to Clos, which is the castle where Leonardo da Vinci lived in France, and we've seen that, and the book talks about that, and it was a lot of really interesting things that related to what I already knew. But this is clearly a book meant for younger children. It is a children's picture book, and I found some of the humor and some of the like antics just a little bit annoying, so it was okay. Overall, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I will have a review up later this week with me reviewing this in French, but it's not like it's going to be more detailed than what I just said. It's just going to be me attempting to use French. So if you want to check that out, there will be English subtitles as well. Okay, so that was week 6 for me. I hope everybody else is having a good reading week. If anybody has read any of the books that I mentioned, go ahead, let me know what you thought in the comments below, or if you read anything interesting this week, let me know. It was very nice to have some middle grade and picture books to fill in this week as I was reading through some much longer things on the side. So next week I'll probably have some bigger books to talk about.